Today. My name is Hadley Bajramovic. I am a senior immigration attorney. I have been working in immigration law since 2004 when I started as an intern while in law school. And here we are in almost 2025. So I have been practicing immigration law for a long time. And just to lay the foundation for why I am here talking about immigration is because I have what I like to call special forces training in immigration law. I started immigration by writing petitions for academics, for scholars, for people who have earned a PhD and are now doing research and development in many different STEM fields and now a lot of the fields in the humanities. And I then moved into the University of California, Riverside, where I continued to do that work. And I worked with non-immigrant visas for academics like H-1Bs and J-1s. And then I started a private practice to work in the Southern California area to help people with family law issues, humanitarian issues like asylum and the U visas, and to represent people who are in removal proceedings in front of an immigration judge. And then a few years later, I started working with the Consulate of Mexico in San Bernardino. And this is where my experience expanded monumentally from talking to nationals of Mexico who came into the consulate because they're undocumented. And a lot of people that come into the consulates do have immigration issues and are looking for passports and identity documents. And so I was talking to them, and over a 3 or 4 year period, I saw thousands of Mexican nationals, and sometimes would help them with their cases, sometimes give them advice only, sometimes do background checks. And then that expanded across the street to the consulate of Guatemala in San Bernardino. And so we started to do the same thing for nationals of Guatemala. And over that period of time, we built our clientele and our practice to 8,000 individuals who we represented in business cases, DACA, U visas, VAWA, Special Juvenile Immigrant Visa, SIGIS. I'm trying not to forget any types of cases that we do. The EB1, the EB2, employment-based self-petitions, removal proceedings. The only thing that we really don't delve into would be the EB5, which is for millionaires, because we are a community-based law firm. We help people in our community. We address the major requirements for our community, and those are the ones that I've listed: non-immigrant visas, H-1Bs, L-1s, O-1s included. And I'm throwing out some visa types in case you hear one that might apply to you that you might be interested in. But with the elections having passed and with the results that we have in the elections, we are seeing an increase of fear and anxiety in the people that we serve. Our clients are contacting us and saying, what now? What's going to happen? Is my case going to be affected? And we really don't know yet. We do know that the president-elect Donald Trump, that's hard for me to say, but I'm going to say the way it is, campaigned on deporting undocumented immigrants. And I heard that yesterday Fox News gave evidence, like it's now known, air quotes, because I don't know how they base their data, that 9% apparently of undocumented immigrants who crossed the border last year, 9% are supposedly convicted felons or have some kind of criminal background. So that was something that was repeated to me by, I call him my MAGA consultant. Anyway, I don't know if that's true. I really doubt that's true. We've known always that undocumented immigrants have a very low incidence of crime in the population, much lower than U.S. citizens do. I mean, U.S. citizens have the criminal element that we need to worry about. But anyway, Trump used the fear that people have of undocumented immigrants and flamed those fear flames, like fan the flames is what I'm trying to say, by saying that they're undocumented and they're killing people and, you know, taking very isolated incidents and putting them on the headlines of the national news and trying to convince people that, you know, they have to be afraid of people coming in from other countries and that they're all criminals. That's just not true. But this is the reality we have now because Trump won, making promises to do mass deportations. And we know that Stephen Miller is one of his chief policy advisors, and Stephen Miller did a lot of damage in immigration during the first Trump term. I was not sure what to expect from the first Trump term. I thought Trump just campaigned on anti-immigrant policies and at a very low level compared to this last campaign. And I thought, well, he's just doing it to get elected. And then find out, you know, in 2017 that Stephen Miller's really got a good understanding of immigration and started to chip away at the rights of immigrants, undocumented immigrants, and people who are making applications for non-immigrant visas and immigrant visas legally, chipping away at their rights too. And so we know that Stephen Miller is still there. He's still a main actor for Trump. And we are hearing the same rumors that you guys are hearing. We don't know for certain, but we're reading about facilities that are being opened in Texas and other places that supposedly can house thousands upon thousands of people in this anticipated mass deportation raid that's going to supposedly happen. So I wanted to come here tonight and tell you about my experiences over time with apprehensions. I'm going to focus on that tonight. Apprehensions by ICE and maybe other law enforcement agencies, including local, state, federal police, possibly Customs and Border Patrol, what really happens. So we call this Know Your Rights workshop. So one of my first notes here is to talk about canceled policies. What that means is that we have, with every president, with every administration, a memo that comes out called Immigration Enforcement Policies. And under the Biden administration, the enforcement policies focused on criminals. So Biden's administration did give the directive to ICE, which is immigration law enforcement, to go after people who have executed removal orders known to be in the U.S., and also people with criminal backgrounds, terrorist backgrounds, but mainly criminal and terrorist backgrounds. So ICE focused on those individuals. And when I say criminal, I mean like felonies and aggravated felonies. So we have not seen in our community too much enforcement because there's not that high incidence of that level of crime in the undocumented population. So what happened in the prior Trump administration can tell us a little bit about, if not everything, about what's going to happen with enforcement policies in the Trump administration. So what we know happened in the past Trump enforcement directives was ICE was given free rein to arrest anybody who is undocumented. Everybody who does not have status is an enforcement priority. And clearly, based on what Trump is saying, That's what will happen in 2025. ICE will get a directive from the Trump administration that everyone who is in the U.S. without status is an enforcement priority, and if detected or apprehended, a proceeding or will take place to remove that person. For people from Mexico, that's really dangerous and bad, especially for people living on the southern border. What we saw and what we still see, but not that much, but in the Obama years, those were the worst years, actually. If a Mexican national was apprehended by ICE, they would be in Mexico the same day. It's because Mexico is a contiguous country, and there's no special travel document needed to put a Mexican national and a Canadian national, for that matter, on a plane. The ICE officers can drive to the border, and from where we're located, that's an hour and 45 minutes, and just find a place, opening in the fence, we call it, and send people back into their home country. And the usual time the ICE will pick up people in our past decade frame that we're going to look at is 4:30 a.m. ICE usually does not walk up and knock on the door. Most of the Know Your Rights workshops talk about that do not open the door. Practically speaking, that doesn't happen. ICE does not tend to knock on doors anymore. When we debrief our clients who've been apprehended, what they're telling us is, oh, were driving to work, they pulled out of their driveway, 4 o'clock in the morning. You know, a lot of people that we represent have some kind of a labor-related job that starts in the early hours of the day. When they pull out and drive maybe a mile away from the house, the lights will come on in the car behind them. They'll be pulled over, and ICE will detain them as they get out of the car. And, you know, the reason ICE apprehends people that way is because they're avoiding the home knock on the door search. Because the Know Your Rights workshops, I guess, have been very successful in that regard. Back in 2009, we would tell people, don't open the door, ask for a warrant. And as a result, ICE rarely knocks on doors. Maybe they still do in some parts of the country, but where we are, they're early morning traffic stops where ICE pulls over their target. And we know that ICE will watch the targets over a couple of days and figure out their routines. I had one particular situation where the target, my client, was picked up in his psychiatric appointment. That meant that he was under surveillance long enough for ICE to understand and know that he had a regular appointment with the psychiatrist, and picked him up there. So while you will hear in a lot of your Know Your Rights workshops, do not open the door, the reality is ICE will do a stakeout and most likely apprehend somebody away from the home. And it's the same with ask to see a warrant signed by a judge. That really refers to a home search. And now I remember something that used to happen back in the Obama administration, and that was that ICE would come to homes, knock on doors, go in the house, looking for one target, and end up arresting multiple targets who are undocumented. I don't think that's happened recently. Not in the many cases we see. Do we hear that happening? But it could happen again, and we'll be picking up all of the stories that we hear from our different sources. For example, we have multiple face groups where we share information. Like, for example, Nerdy Immigration Lawyers, that's a favorite on Facebook. The AILA Immigration Attorneys groups, we share stories. So we kind of know, like I call it, keeping our finger on the pulse of the vibe across the United States about what's happening in different areas. And we'll talk about it here. We'll come on these platforms and talk about what's happening so people will know how ICE is enforcing, and information is power. But those multiple arrests in the home, I have not heard of happening lately. But I'm in California, and California has the Trust Act and is pretty much mostly a sanctuary state. And what that means is that local law enforcement, that means state, city, county, they are not allowed to participate in ICE investigations. Now, compare that, sorry, this is live, but compare that to what happened back in the Obama years. There used to be these relationships formed between the federal government and local law enforcement called 287G agreements, where local police would be deputized, that's the fancy word, like make you a deputy back in the Wild Wild West way, to enforce immigration laws. So your local police department, like here in Riverside, California, cannot enforce immigration laws. But back then, they might have, if they had that agreement with the federal government, which would allow a Riverside police officer to pull somebody over in a routine traffic stop, or the retins, the DUI checkpoints, find out people are undocumented, and then enforce an immigration law or hand those people over to ICE. That can't happen in California, in other states, but it can happen in some states. For example, Texas, Florida, Alabama, Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, Tennessee. Those states, that can be done. And if you live in those states, then it's probably in your best interest to be prepared for a potential law enforcement. And we don't know how broad it will be. We don't know how wide that law enforcement will be until we see what actions Trump takes with his advisor, Stephen Miller, and the new Department of Homeland Security. I can't remember who it is, but I know it's somebody who is not qualified. You have the right to remain silent. That is true. You can remain silent, but silence probably won't help you when ICE is preparing to drive you down to the southern border. What I recommend that anybody does if they're apprehended is to declare asylum and tell ICE that they're afraid to go back to their home country. And this is very important for Mexican nationals because, again, as I mentioned, Mexico shares a border with the U.S. It means it's a contiguous country. So ICE does not need to get special permission or travel documents or confirm the nationality with the consulate like ICE must do for maybe Guatemalan nationals or Venezuelan nationals or Chinese nationals. For Mexican nationals, there's no extra process required to remove somebody other than drive that person to the border and find a door in the fence and say, go back to Mexico. So for Mexican nationals, your first line of defense is to request the relief of asylum. If you are afraid to go back to Mexico, you must tell ICE. And then the officer is going to ask why. So at that moment, you must explain why you have fear to go back to Mexico. And if you have an articulable, like a well-spoken, relatable reason, and I'm talking about this in a practical sense, okay? Under the law, there are certain prongs under asylum law that you must meet to be eligible for asylum. But if you can articulate and show an ICE officer that you are afraid to return to your home country, then there are protocols that kick in. The ICE officer should stop the removal effort and allow you to see an immigration judge, which means the ICE officer should start the process to do a notice to appear to send you before an immigration judge. And if you don't have any crimes, they should release you back to the family for a family monitoring program. So the family becomes responsible to make sure that you attend your future immigration hearings. But in the case of people who have crimes, you might be put into a detention facility, or if there's another reason why ICE believes you're a flight risk or a danger to society, they might put you in a detention facility. But you know what? That's better for an immigration lawyer to have you here, where the immigration lawyer has a chance to get you released from a detention facility, or the immigration lawyer has a chance to fight for you to stay in immigration court. And once you're deported, all of our options diminish drastically on how we can bring you back. So declaring asylum, at least it should give you the right to remain in the U.S. and fight for the relief of asylum. It doesn't mean that you're going to get the relief of asylum. And a lot of times I hear Mexican nationals say, but there's no political asylum in Mexico. It's not what we're talking about. Political asylum is a different type of relief than what I call social group asylum. And we do win social group asylum cases. Under social group asylum, what we're telling the government in our application is that you're a member of a social group that's cognitively visible in society. That means that people can see that you're a member of a particular social group. And my office focuses mainly on 2 social groups. We have others that we've won. Women, being a female, sometimes works in domestic violence situations. Another one is being gay, LGBT. Another one that we've defended a lot is being deaf. Those are particular social groups that people know that you're a member of that group just by looking at you in society. Secondly, we have to show that because you're a member of that social group, that you were or could be harmed in your society because you're a member of that social group. We call that nexus of persecution. We have to show that the government either allows that persecution or acquiesces, like they don't stop it. They don't try to protect you. And then we have to show that there's nowhere in the country, if we're talking about Mexico, where you would be safe. Like if you're a member of a particular social group, you're persecuted, the country allows it to happen, and you can't go to, I don't know, Tulum and escape it. Again, we're talking about Mexico. And most of the time my clients say once you're persecuted in Mexico, they can find you anywhere, and they believe it. But then we have to prove it. Finally, asylum has this rule. It's like cutting off the government's responsibility to an individual. The government says you must declare asylum within 1 year of entering the United States. And because of that cutoff, a lot of people are not eligible for asylum. But it doesn't mean that they don't have the right to move forward in front of a judge, tell their story, explain why they didn't declare asylum early, explain why they're the member of a social group, explain how they were harmed or how they believe that they will be harmed. People have that right. So if you are apprehended by ICE and you're being taken into custody and you think you're about ready to be thrown on a bus to go down to Tijuana or Juarez or whatever's the closest southern border, tell the officer you're afraid, that you have fear to be removed to Mexico. All other countries in general, we have more time, because if you're from Guatemala, for example, ICE must go through steps of confirming that you're a Guatemalan national and get confirmation or travel documents to be returned to the home country. And this gives an attorney time to get involved in the process. Even with these kind of delays that allows an immigration attorney to come in, we still think you should have a plan in place. You should sit with your family and discuss what if. What if somebody who's vulnerable for removal in this family is apprehended? What are we going to do? Well, we have a phone number. Can somebody tell me the phone number so I can tell our viewers? We have a phone number for people to call, an apprehension hotline. It's only in the case a family member is apprehended. That number is 888-735-8731. I'm going to tell that number repeatedly in this broadcast. If somebody in your family is apprehended, we have this special hotline set up so that you can contact us first thing, because like I mentioned before, these apprehensions happen in the morning. So we have people on staff here that are waiting for those calls and allow us to mobilize as quickly as possible to prevent a same-day removal. The number is 888-735-8731. So that should be the top item on a plan of action. Contact hotline, 888-735-8731. You should develop a relationship with an immigration attorney. Maybe go in and have a consultation now. Let the attorney know you're afraid, that you're at risk of removal. You want a relationship with an attorney, and that's something that we do. We do free consultations in my office. We get to know the facts behind your status, like when was your entry date, how many times did you come into the U.S., who are your relatives, do you have fear? And we have that record in case you're apprehended. We can pull it up right away and figure out our strategy. We don't charge for this. We do 30-minute consultations for free. We learn people's cases sometimes, and maybe I'm going to say half of the time. We can identify a type of process that people can move forward with that they didn't know. That's because there's a lot of bad information and bad advice in the undocumented community. And me and many of my colleagues and many of the organizations that we work with are combating that with these type of services where we're live streaming and talking about what to do now if you are in an apprehension situation. And when I say apprehension, I mean ICE is trying to take you in. So what we recommend is that you develop a relationship with an attorney, get a consultation with an attorney, and have a plan for when, if, hopefully not going to happen, a family member is taken into custody. And the hotline number, I'll repeat again, is 888-735-8731. When you call that number, the person that you will talk to is going to take information and pass it on to an immigration attorney very quickly. So this is for the urgency of being taken into custody. It is not a number to call to say, I want to know what my chances are to get papers. This is not that number. We have other numbers. You can call the office, schedule an appointment with the attorney. That would be me, my office, or Layla, and do a pre-screening. That's not an urgent situation when you're trying to figure out what your chances are to get status. What we're talking about here is a hotline for people who have been detained by ICE. So we are asking people to put this number on their refrigerators or in that spot where everybody knows where that number is in case somebody in the family is detained by ICE. That's the only reason to use this number. And I'll say it again, 888-735-8731. And if anybody out there has questions about what to do if ICE comes to your home, to your community, and how to handle it, please ask me those questions. I'm here on a live stream to take questions. I've been telling you about things I've experienced, what I know happens in our community, which is Southern California. And, we don't have as much ICE enforcement as maybe occurs in other states where the local law enforcement is not bound by law to stay out of ICE investigations. In other states, particularly the red states, southern states, middle America, we know that there are a lot of undocumented people living there who maybe don't have access to immigration counsel or advice. And one thing that's very sad for me is to hear people tell me that they were advised by an attorney, and I can tell that the attorney they talk to is not practicing immigration law. They probably hear some bad facts and think, oh, they're not eligible for anything, I'm not going to encourage this person. And, that's wrong because, having a criminal background. Oh, I heard today that somebody who owes money to the IRS was told by an attorney that they cannot naturalize. That's not true. You can owe money to the IRS and still be eligible for naturalization. What the government's interested is if you failed to pay on agreement that you made with the IRS. So if you owe money and made an agreement with the IRS to pay back the money, but didn't follow the agreement, then you're not eligible to naturalize. But a lot of attorneys just dabble in immigration law and tell people things that are just wrong and hold people back from moving forward with immigration relief. So they pull them back when they could move forward. And that's why it's very important to talk to immigration attorneys that have a minimum of 5 years experience in immigration law, because it really takes that long to really understand the complexity. And sometimes it's about, for an attorney, knowing when they don't know the answer. And so if I don't know the answer, and that still happens to me 20 years later, I tell my potential client, I don't know the answer. I need to research that and get back to you. Is that okay? And sometimes I find that, I do have a really good route to relief when that person gives me the time to research it, because immigration is an incredibly vast and complex body of law. It's like the Atlantic Ocean. You might have sailed across the Atlantic Ocean, but you certainly don't know the whole body of water. I don't know if anybody does, because it's so vast. And the same thing with immigration law. It is so vast and so complex. It has so many procedures, and the procedures change. And that makes it very hard for any immigration attorney to know everything in immigration law. Nobody does. It's impossible. But we can, through experience, through time, become better at it and know what to advise our clients. And I would say after about 5 years, that's when immigration attorneys start to be very effective and understand and be able to spot issues and potential relief. So my recommendation is to go with somebody who has at least 5 years of immigration experience. And I'm more than happy to meet with anybody across the United States, anywhere in the United States, and help them know what their chances are. Talk to them anywhere in the U.S. I will talk to you about how to plan and prepare for a potential deportation. Hopefully that's not going to happen, guys. Hopefully this was a lot of election talk and bluster, because we also know the importance of the undocumented community to America, to the economy, to the food supply, to all different types of industries that rely on the labor of people who are here without status. But what we've seen, what we've heard is not good. And we want to prepare for it. We want people to be prepared, to know how to act if ICE, pulls you over. If you see those blue lights at 4:30 a.m., We want you to know what to do and to hopefully get your opportunity to remain in the U.S. and see an immigration judge. So I'm not seeing any questions. Do I have a question?
Yes.
Yes, Mari says I have a question.
You have a few from different platforms. This is from
Okay.
TikTok.
From TikTok.
Yes. He's saying sometimes I hear conflicting advice. What's right? What rights I have in different situations. What is one common mistake people make that I should avoid?
Well, one of the most common mistakes that I hear is that people don't want to talk or sign anything when they're apprehended, and they're taught firma nada, firma nada. I mean, it's just an easy thing to remember. And what is the most important thing is not to focus on that, is to focus on asserting your right to see an immigration judge and having the family prepared. People don't prepare. So being prepared, having a relationship with an immigration attorney, being able to call an immigration attorney, and I think we're talking about in an apprehension situation, right? Marty, when they're saying you're hearing conflicting advice?
I think he means that he's getting different information from different probably attorneys.
Oh, different. Oh,
yeah.
Well, you know what? I would ask, if you're getting conflicting information, it's easy. Ask the attorney or the notario, what are you basing your opinion upon? You know, and if they're saying, oh, well, you know, I did this case for somebody and I did this case for another person and it was approved. That is not a legal basis. Ask for the law. Ask for the reason that the individual made this opinion. Like, for example, if you're married to a U.S. citizen and you have a legal entry, you can adjust status in the U.S. if you're undocumented. And if somebody were to ask me, well, how do you know that? And if I said, oh, well, I did it for Jane and John and it worked, that's not a legal answer. The legal answer is under Section 245A of the Immigration and Nationality Act, if you have these two circumstances, then all unlawful presence is waived and the individual is permitted to adjust status in the U.S. as an exception. Okay? That is a legal answer. That is somebody who knows what they're talking about. So you want to ask the practitioner, the immigration attorney, how do they know what they're saying if you're getting conflicting advice. I have to build trust with people all the time that have gotten advice from another attorney. And I've pulled the law up on the USCIS website to back up what I'm saying because people trust the government website. So, you know, that would be another way to, you know, show me, to ask the person, show me where you got your information. Any immigration attorney that's practiced more than 5 years will be able to show you something on the USCIS website or some law or something. They'll be able to find it quickly and show you. Okay, go ahead, Maury.
And then he said, I appreciate your answer. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So this is another question. I worry about what might happen if I'm stopped by police or ICE. What's the very first thing I should remember to do in that moment?
Okay, if you're pulled over by ICE, the very first thing you should do in that moment is something I've already mentioned a couple of times. If you're afraid to go back to your home country, you tell the ICE officer respectfully, I have fear to go back to my home country, and you should explain thoroughly why. If you tell an ICE officer, I'm afraid to go back to my home country because I can't get a job there, it's not going to be a valid reason, and that probably will not work, and the ICE officer will move forward with the removal. But if you tell the ICE officer, I'm afraid to go back to my home country because I'm going to be beaten or harmed, or, you know, a lot of people from different areas of Mexico believe they could possibly be killed. And if you can explain credibly, which means, you know, truthfully, why you have that fear, then the ICE officer should allow you to see an immigration judge. That is the most important thing you can do to stop your removal. And also, as I've mentioned, you know, dozens of times here, have a relationship developed already with an immigration attorney so that if you're pulled over, the immigration attorney can do the job of contacting ICE and telling them that you have fear for you. or trying to stop the removal for you. And I'll give you the number again, 888-735-8731. If you're pulled over by ICE, you're going to be allowed to call your family. You call your family and you tell them, call that lawyer. Okay.
Next question is, if someone comes to my door claiming to be law enforcement, how can I know if I'm safe letting them in?
If I really doubt that anybody from ICE is going to come to your door. Okay. They're just going out and following people in their cars now. But if they were to come to your door, you do have a right to see a badge and a search warrant to come into your home. If you don't see that, you don't open the door. Don't send your kids to the door. Just, ask for a warrant. If they do have a warrant and they, have come with their badges and warrant, then send the person they're looking for to the door and let them take them, because you do not want ICE in your house looking for other people. So it's just, in my experience, and I know probably this is a controversial thing to say, but it's probably the right thing to do, is just send that person that they have the search warrant for to the door, and then call 888-735-8731, 888-735-8731, and tell the attorney, okay, they just took, Jim, they had a warrant for Jim, they took Jim, please do something. And that's when, we will do what we can to stop the removal. We can't do that all over the country, but we can certainly find somebody for you or help you, because we have connections through AILA and other organizations to mobilize somebody in just about anywhere in the country.
So another question is, I've heard so many different things about what to say or do during a traffic stop or checkpoint. What's one thing I should never say or do?
One thing you should never say or do. Well, I mean, in a routine traffic stop, the information is going to depend on what the circumstances are. You should never lie. I mean, if they're going to take you into custody, they're going to do it no matter what you say. So don't lie. That's the worst thing you can do. Or be combative or belligerent. I can't say this works with every officer, but usually when you're respectful and cooperative, they will try to work with you. So if you're respectful and cooperative and you tell somebody you have fear and you don't want to go home and you're asked to see an immigration lawyer, then there's more chances that that officer is going to cooperate with you and give you that opportunity. Now, if you are cussing and running away and making everything difficult, then the ICE officer's less likely to be cooperative with you. So you want that ICE officer to be cooperative with you as much as the ICE officer wants you to be cooperative with them. Most of the time they're doing their job, and that if they're going to take you in because you're undocumented, they're going to take you in. So there might be some very exceptional circumstances where an ICE officer will let you go. But once an ICE officer determines that you're undocumented, and if the enforcement priorities change, they will take you in. You just have to be prepared and, follow what I've been saying throughout this stream, which is to have that number on the refrigerator, develop a relationship with an immigration attorney, and have the family prepared to call that immigration attorney in case you're apprehended. But if you're undocumented and they're going to take you in, there's nothing you can say or do to stop it. So just don't lie. Okay.
And the last question as of now I have is, I want to feel more in control if something happens. What simple steps can I take today to protect myself and my family?
Okay, control is about having information and knowing what to do. And so the best thing you can do is to contact an immigration attorney and talk to the immigration attorney, find out if there's any type of relief that you might already be eligible for. Some people are eligible for U visas but didn't know it. Sometimes people are eligible for asylum and didn't know it. So talking to an experienced immigration attorney is going to help you to know that. And then also an experienced immigration attorney will help you develop a strategy for if you are detained. So that's the best thing you can do, is find an experienced immigration attorney that you trust and you can develop a relationship with. And, you know, of my clients, I have hundreds of them that know me personally, that have been in my office. I know their families. And, you know, I know that if any of them are detained, that we're going to mobilize in my office to get out to the processing office that's here locally for ICE. And we'll get out there and do what we can to stop the removal. So thank you, everybody. Those were great questions. The questions help everyone who's participating and watching. We really appreciate them. Thank you very much. We will continue to do this regularly and provide you updates and anything that we hear that's going on across the U.S. as far as enforcement, we will share with you. Any, you know, new tactics that we see happening with ICE. And please feel free to reach out to us at the Immigration Law Offices of Hadley Bajramovic. No matter where you are in the country, we do telephone consultations, Zoom, Teams, FaceTime, you name it. We're willing to talk to you. Thank you. Have a good evening, and God bless you and take care.